My dad called me an embarrassment at my own graduation. Those words cut deeper than any knife could. While my brother got a new car and endless praise, I got humiliation in front of everyone I knew. For 12 years, I carried that shame, that anger. But you know what they say about patience. It's not just a virtue, it's a weapon. And when the tables finally turned, when I held the deed to his house and every last dollar of his mortgage in my hands, the embarrassment wasn't mine anymore. Hun, this is the story of how the son they threw away became the man who owned everything they had. My name is John, and this is how I made them regret every single word. My name is John, and I'm 43 years old now. But this story begins when I was 21, standing on a stage in a rented graduation gown that smelled like mothballs and broken dreams. That day should have been the proudest moment of my life. Instead, it became the day that changed everything. I worked my way through state college. Not the fancy private university my younger brother Marcus attended, paid for entirely by our parents. No, I got the state school experience, complete with student loans, night shifts at a warehouse, and ramen noodles for dinner more times than I care to remember. But I did it. I graduated with a degree in business administration, and my GPA was nothing to sneeze at either. 3.7. I was proud of that number. I thought my parents would be too. The ceremony was held outdoors on a humid May afternoon. The kind of heat that makes your collar stick to your neck and your forehead shine with sweat under the merciless sun. My mom and dad sat in the bleachers. My mom fanning herself with the program. My dad checking his watch every few minutes like he had somewhere more important to be. Marcus wasn't there. He was still at Yale, too busy with his own life to watch his older brother walk across a stage. Quoting when they called my name, I walked up with my head held high. The dean shook my hand. I grabbed that diploma and I looked out into the crowd, searching for my parents' faces. I found them. My mom was clapping politely. My dad was looking at his phone. That image burned itself into my memory. The moment I achieved something I'd worked 4 years for, and my own father couldn't be bothered to watch. After the ceremony, families gathered on the lawn for pictures and celebrations. I saw other graduates getting hugged, getting flowers, getting genuine joy from their loved ones. I found my parents standing under a tree, still in the shade because God forbid my dad get too uncomfortable. I walked up to them with my diploma in hand, ready to hear something, anything that sounded like pride. "Well, you finally did it," my dad said, his voice flat as a pancake. "Took you long enough. Took me long enough. I was 21. I graduated on time. But I bit my tongue because I wanted this day to be good. I needed it to be good. Thanks for coming," I said, forcing a smile. "It means a lot that you're here." My mom gave me a quick hug, the kind that feels more like an obligation than affection. "We're proud of you, honey," she said, but her eyes didn't match her words. They were already scanning the crowd, like she was looking for an exit. Then my dad dropped the bomb that would echo in my head for the next 12 years. "You know, John, Marcus is graduating from Yale next year. Now that's something to be proud of. That's real achievement. This," he gestured vaguely at the ceremony behind us, at my diploma, at me. "This is fine, I guess. But let's be honest, you're not exactly setting the world on fire. State school, average grades, no job lined up. You're kind of an embarrassment compared to what your brother's accomplished." An embarrassment? He called me an embarrassment. At my own graduation, in front of the few friends I'd invited to meet my parents afterward. The words hit me like a physical blow, stealing the air from my lungs. I stood there, frozen, unable to process what I'd just heard. My mother said nothing. She didn't defend me. She didn't tell him he was out of line. She just stood there, silent, complicit. One of my friends, Dave, tried to break the tension. "Hey, Mr. Patterson, that's pretty harsh. John worked really hard for this." My dad turned to Dave with a cold smile. "I'm sure he did. But hard work without results is just wasted effort, isn't it? Now, if you'll excuse us, we have a long drive home." And just like that, they left. No celebration dinner. No proud parent photos. They just walked away, leaving me standing there with my diploma and my humiliation. Dave and my other friends tried to console me, tried to salvage the day, but the damage was done. Those words had carved themselves into my soul. Don't forget to subscribe, hit that like button, and comment on this video. That night, alone in my cramped apartment, I made a decision. I wasn't going to let their judgment define me. I wasn't going to be the embarrassment they thought I was. I was going to prove them wrong, not with words, but with actions. Not next week or next month, but however long it took. I would become successful beyond their wildest expectations, and when I did, they would see exactly what they'd thrown away. The next few years were brutal. I took a job at a small marketing firm making barely above minimum wage. My coworkers were recent graduates like me, all of us hungry. All of us trying to prove ourselves in a world that seemed designed to chew us up and spit us out. I worked 60-hour weeks. I learned everything I could about digital marketing, social media strategy, brand development. I went to networking events even when I was exhausted. Read books, took online courses, absorbed information like a sponge. My parents rarely called. When they did, the conversations were short and focused entirely on Marcus. Marcus made law review at Yale. Marcus got an internship at a prestigious firm in Manhattan. Marcus was dating the daughter of a senator. Marcus. I became an afterthought. The disappointing older son who was doing something with computers, as my mom vaguely described it to her friends. Creed didn't go home for holidays. I told myself it was because I was too busy, but the truth was I couldn't stomach sitting at that dinner table, watching them fawn over Marcus while barely acknowledging my existence. The few times I did visit, nothing had changed. My achievements were met with polite nods. Marcus's achievements were met with champagne and celebration. 3 years after graduation, I took a risk. I left the marketing firm and joined a startup with 2 other guys I'd met at a tech conference. We had an idea for a platform that would help small businesses manage their social media presence more effectively. It was a gamble. The pay was terrible at first. We worked out of a cramped office that smelled like old coffee and desperation. But I believed in what we were building. My dad called me one night during this period, a rare occurrence. I answered, hopeful that maybe, just maybe, he was calling to check on me, to see how I was doing. "John, I heard you left your job," he said. No greeting, no warmth. "Your mother's worried you're throwing your life away." "I joined a startup, Dad. We're building something really innovative." He laughed. Actually laughed. "A startup? Jesus! John, when are you going to grow up and get a real job? You're 24 years old. Marcus is already being recruited by top law firms and you're playing around with pipe dreams. Do you have any idea how embarrassing it is when people ask me what my sons do for a living?" There was that word again. Embarrassing. It still had the power to cut me. But this time, it also fueled something else. Determination. Rage. A burning need to prove him wrong so thoroughly that he'd choke on his own words. "I'm going to make this work, Dad," I said quietly. "Sure you will," he replied, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "Good luck with that." He hung up without saying goodbye. Don't forget to subscribe, hit that like button, and comment on this video. I threw myself into the startup with everything I had. 18-hour days became normal. I lived on energy drinks and takeout. My social life disappeared. Relationships fell apart because I had no time for anything but work. But slowly, painfully, we started to gain traction. Small businesses signed up for our platform. We got positive reviews. We attracted the attention of a few angel investors who gave us enough funding to hire a small team and move into a better office. By the time I was 27, our little startup had grown into a legitimate company. We had 50 employees, offices in 3 cities, and annual revenue in the millions. I was the chief marketing officer, and I was making more money than I'd ever dreamed possible. But I didn't tell my parents. I didn't call them with updates. I let them continue thinking I was still struggling with my little pipe dream. Marcus, meanwhile, had become a corporate lawyer at a big firm in New York. He made good money, lived in a nice apartment, wore expensive suits. My parents treated him like he'd discovered the cure for cancer. Every conversation with my mother included updates on Marcus's latest case, Marcus's latest vacation, Marcus's latest achievement. I'd listen politely and say nothing about my own success. When I was 29, something big happened. A major tech company approached us about acquisition. They wanted to buy our platform, integrate it into their existing services, and they were willing to pay handsomely for it. After months of negotiations, we sold. My share of the sale was $8 million. $8 million. Kid who ate ramen every night and worked warehouse shifts to pay for state college was suddenly wealthy beyond his wildest dreams. I bought a nice house in a good neighborhood. Nothing too flashy, but comfortable. 3 bedrooms, a home office, a backyard. I invested most of the money wisely, setting myself up for long-term financial security. I started my own consulting firm, helping other startups develop their marketing strategies. The work was fulfilling and the money was excellent. Life was good, better than good. But I still didn't tell my parents. I wanted to wait for the right moment. I wanted the revelation to hurt, to make them understand what they'd dismissed, what they'd called embarrassing. Petty may be, but after years of being treated like the family disappointment, I felt entitled to a little pettiness. The opportunity came when I was 33. My mom called me, which was unusual. She sounded stressed, her voice tight with worry. "John, I need to talk to you about something," she said. "It's about your father." My stomach clenched. For a second, I thought she was going to tell me he was sick, that something terrible had happened. "What's wrong?" I asked. "He's in trouble financially. The business isn't doing well. We might lose the house." My father owned a small manufacturing company that made parts for industrial equipment. It had been successful for years, providing my family with an upper-middle-class lifestyle. Doug's the nice cars, Marcus's Yale tuition. But apparently, times had changed. "What happened?" I asked, trying to keep my voice neutral. Competition from overseas manufacturers, rising costs, some bad investments. He's too proud to tell you himself, but we're in real trouble. "John, we've taken out a second mortgage on the house, maxed out credit cards. We owe over $400,000. The bank is threatening foreclosure. $400,000, to most people, an insurmountable sum. To me, after the sale of my company, it was significant but manageable. I could write a check for that amount and barely notice the dent in my accounts. But I didn't say that. Not yet. "What about Marcus?" I asked. "Can't he help?" My mother was quiet for a moment. "Marcus has his own expenses. His apartment in Manhattan is expensive. He has student loans from Yale. He's helping where he can, but it's not enough. Of course, golden child Marcus, despite his prestigious job and his fancy degree, couldn't save them." The irony was almost too perfect. "Mom, I'm going to need to think about this," I said. "Can you send me all the financial details? Everything. The mortgage information, the debts, all of it." "Of course," she said, relief flooding her voice. "Thank you, John. I knew we could count on you." Could count on me? After years of dismissing me, of calling me an embarrassment, of acting like my achievements meant nothing, now they could count on me. The anger that had been simmering for over a decade started to boil. Don't forget to subscribe, hit that like button, and comment on this video. I spent the next week reviewing their financial situation. It was worse than my mom had described. Carol, my dad, had made a series of terrible business decisions trying to compete with manufacturers who had lower labor costs and more efficient operations. He'd taken out loans at high interest rates, desperate to keep the company afloat. The house, the beautiful 4-bedroom colonial where I'd grown up, was mortgaged to the hilt. They were 3 months behind on payments. Foreclosure was imminent. I could have just paid off their debts, written a check, saved the day, been the hero. But where was the justice in that? Where was the lesson? After everything they'd put me through, after years of being made to feel worthless, I wanted them to understand what it felt like to need someone they'd dismissed. I called my mother back. "I've reviewed everything," I said. "I can help, but we need to do this properly. I want to buy the house from you and Dad. I'll pay off the mortgage and all the debts, but the house will be in my name. Code. You can live there rent-free for as long as you need, but it will be mine. Take it or leave it. My mother was silent for a long moment. John, this is our home. We've lived here for 30 years, and you're about to lose it, I said, my voice hard. This is my offer. It's non-negotiable. I'll give you 24 hours to decide. She tried to argue, tried to negotiate, but I held firm. Finally, she said she'd talk to my father and call me back. I knew what the answer would be. They were desperate. They had no choice. The next day, my father called me. It was the first time he'd called me in over 2 years. His voice was different than I remembered. Smaller. Defeated. Your mother told me about your offer, he said. We'll accept. We don't have any other options. I'll have my lawyer draw up the papers, I said. I'll need you both to sign over the deed. All the debts will be paid off within 30 days. Cool. You can stay in the house as long as you want, but it will legally be mine. John, he said, and I heard something in his voice I'd never heard before. Humility, thank you. I know we don't deserve this from you. No, I said quietly, you don't. I hung up before he could respond. My hands were shaking. This was it. This was the moment I'd been working toward for 12 years. Even if I hadn't known it, the embarrassment was about to become the savior. But I wasn't done yet. There was one more thing I needed to do. 2 weeks later, all the papers were signed. The house was officially mine. I'd paid off every debt my parents had accumulated. They were financially free, living in a home they no longer owned, courtesy of the son they'd called an embarrassment. But I hadn't told them about my money yet. I hadn't explained how I was able to do this. As far as they knew, I'd somehow scraped together the funds, maybe taken out loans of my own. I decided it was time for a family meeting. I called my mother and told her I was coming over on Saturday. I wanted both of them there. I wanted Marcus there too. It was time for the whole family to hear the truth. Saturday afternoon, I pulled up to the house in my car. Nothing too flashy, a nice sedan, but not ostentatious. I'd learned that real wealth whispers while poverty shouts. I wanted my success to speak for itself, not through material displays, but through undeniable facts. I walked in through the front door. My parents were sitting in the living room, looking older than I remembered. My father's hair had gone completely gray. My mother had new lines around her eyes. Marcus was there too, looking uncomfortable in jeans and a polo shirt, his lawyer armor left behind in New York. "Hi, John," my mother said, standing to give me a hug. This one felt more genuine than the one at my graduation. Desperation and gratitude have a way of making people more sincere. My father stood too, extending his hand. I shook it, feeling the weakness in his grip. This man, who had once seemed so powerful, so judgmental, now looked diminished, broken. "Thanks for coming," I said, taking a seat across from them. "I wanted to talk to all of you together." Marcus leaned back in his chair, arms crossed. "This should be good," he muttered. Even now, even with me having just saved our parents from financial ruin, he couldn't hide his condescension. I looked at each of them in turn, taking my time. 12 years ago, at my college graduation, Dad said something to me. He called me an embarrassment. He said I wasn't setting the world on fire, that I was nothing compared to Marcus. Do you remember that, Dad? My father's face flushed. He looked down at his hands. "John, I'm not looking for an apology." I cut him off. "I'm just establishing the facts. For 12 years, I've been the disappointment in this family. The one who went to state school instead of an Ivy League. The one who worked regular jobs instead of becoming a lawyer. The one whose achievements were never quite good enough to celebrate. Isn't that right?" My mother opened her mouth to protest, but I raised my hand. "Please, let me finish. I need to say this." I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the backyard where I'd played as a kid. When you called me a few weeks ago, desperate for help, I could have said no. I could have let you lose this house, let you face the consequences of bad decisions and terrible investments. Part of me wanted you to feel what it's like to lose everything, to be humiliated, to be judged as a failure. But you didn't, my mother said softly. You saved us. I turned to face them. I saved you because, despite everything, you're still my parents. But I want you to understand who saved you. I want you to know exactly who the embarrassment really is. I pulled out my phone and opened my banking app. I turned the screen toward them, showing my account balance. Even after buying the house and paying off their debts, the number was substantial, over $7 million. My mother gasped. Marcus sat forward, his eyes wide. My father just stared, his face going pale. 12 years ago, you dismissed me as an embarrassment. 5 years ago, when I told you I was working at a startup, you laughed at me. Dad, you called it a pipe dream. Coey, you asked me when I was going to get a real job. Do you remember? My father nodded slowly, unable to speak. That startup sold for $22 million. My share was $8 million. I've been running a successful consulting firm for the past 4 years, making about $500,000 annually. The house you're sitting in, I bought it with cash. Your debts, I paid them with money I barely noticed leaving my account. I'm not telling you this to brag. I'm telling you this so you understand something very important. I walked back to my chair and sat down, leaning forward. Success isn't measured by the name of your school or the prestige of your job title. It's measured by what you build, by the value you create, by the obstacles you overcome. I was never your embarrassment. I was your son who worked harder than anyone else because I had something to prove, and I proved it. Not to you, to myself. Don't forget to subscribe, hit that like button, and comment on this video. The room was silent. Marcus looked like he'd been slapped. My mother had tears running down her face. My father sat with his head in his hands, his shoulders shaking slightly. I don't want your apologies, I continued. I don't need them anymore. What I want is for you to understand that the way you treated me was wrong. It was cruel. Cohen, and if you'd shown me even a fraction of the support you showed Marcus, if you'd believed in me instead of dismissing me, maybe we wouldn't be here right now. Maybe you would have come to me for advice before making those terrible business decisions. Maybe we would have had a relationship where I wanted to help you instead of feeling like I was proving a point. My mother finally spoke, her voice choked with emotion. We were wrong, John. We were so wrong. I don't know how to make it right. Cunt, I said simply. You can't give me back those 12 years. You can't undo the hurt, but you can do better going forward. You can recognize that both your sons have value, not just the one who followed the path you approved of. I stood up to leave. I'd said what I needed to say. The weight I'd been carrying for over a decade felt lighter now, like I'd finally set down a heavy burden. John, wait, my father said, his voice rough. He stood up, looking older than his 60 years. You're right about all of it. I was a terrible father to you. I let my own narrow definition of success blind me to what you were accomplishing. I was proud of Marcus because his achievements were easy to understand, easy to show off to my friends what you did. Building something from nothing, taking risks, working impossible hours, that scared me. It reminded me that I never had that kind of courage. So I dismissed it. I dismissed you. And I'm sorry. I know you said you don't want apologies, but I need to say it anyway. I'm so sorry. I looked at this man who had dominated my childhood, who had the power to make me feel small with just a few words. Now he looked small himself, humbled, human. I appreciate that, Dad, I said. I do, but I need you to understand something. I didn't save you to get an apology. I didn't do it to prove I'm better than you. I did it because family is supposed to take care of each other even when they don't deserve it. Even when they've hurt you. That's what being the bigger person means. It's not about revenge. It's about being better than the hurt that was done to you. Marcus finally spoke up, his voice uncertain. John, I didn't know. I didn't know how they treated you. I was so focused on my own life, my own success. I never stopped to think about what you were going through. I turned to my younger brother. Call Marcus, you were the golden child. You got the support, the encouragement, the belief. I'm not mad at you for that. You didn't ask for it any more than I asked to be dismissed. But going forward, maybe try to see beyond your own bubble. Not everyone has it as easy as you did. He nodded, looking genuinely ashamed. I will, I promise. Kawhi moved toward the door, ready to leave this chapter of my life behind. But my mother stopped me one more time. John, can you forgive us someday? I paused, my hand on the doorknob. It was a good question. Could I forgive them? Did I even want to? Forgiveness felt like letting them off the hook, like saying what they did was okay. But holding on to anger for the rest of my life would only hurt me, not them. I'm working on it, Mom, I said, honestly. I'm working on it. But forgiveness takes time. You can't hurt someone for 12 years and expect them to let it go in a single conversation. Cunt. If you want a relationship with me going forward, you're going to have to earn it. Show me through your actions, not just your words, that you see me differently now, that you respect me, that you value me. We will, she said firmly. We will do better, I promise you. I nodded and walked out the door. As I drove away from that house, the house that was now legally mine, I felt a complex mix of emotions. Satisfaction, yes. Vindication, but also sadness. Gladness for all the years we'd wasted, for the relationship we could have had if they'd just been willing to see me for who I was instead of who they wanted me to be. Over the next few months, things slowly changed. My parents started calling more regularly, asking about my work, my life, my interests. The conversations were awkward at first, like we were strangers learning to know each other. But gradually, they improved. My father started asking for business advice, genuinely interested in my perspective. My mother invited me to family dinners where, for the first time in my life, my achievements were acknowledged alongside Marcus's. Marcus and I started talking more to be admitted that the pressure of being the golden child had its own burden, that he'd always felt like he had to be perfect to maintain their approval. We bonded over our shared experiences of parental expectation just from different angles. Pre-seed, he was dealing with the pressure of being the favorite while I dealt with the pain of being dismissed. Neither was healthy. Don't forget to subscribe, hit that like button, and comment on this video. 1 year after I bought the house, my father's manufacturing company finally went under. He'd tried to save it, but the market had changed too much. He was devastated, his identity wrapped up in being a business owner. I helped him through that period, not with money this time, but with understanding. I knew what it felt like to fail, to have people judge you, to question your worth. We had real conversations for the first time in my life, honest conversations about fear, about pride, about regret. He told me one night, sitting on the back porch of what used to be his house, I look at you now and I see everything I wish I'd been. Brave enough to take risks, strong enough to handle rejection, smart enough to build something real. You were never the embarrassment, John. I was. I was embarrassed by my own fear, my own limitations, and I projected that onto you. I'm sorry for that. I'm sorry for all of it. I know, Dad, I said. I know. We sat in silence for a while, watching the sun set over the neighborhood. It wasn't perfect. Our relationship still had scars that might never fully heal, but it was better. It was real. And that was something. Marcus eventually left his corporate law job and started his own practice. Focusing on helping small businesses with legal issues, he said I inspired him to take that risk, to stop living for other people's approval. We became close in a way we never were growing up. Brothers, in truth, not just in name. My consulting business continued to thrive. I started mentoring young entrepreneurs, especially those who came from backgrounds where they weren't supported or believed in. AI knew what it felt like to have people bet against you, and I wanted to be the person who bet on them instead. Some of my mentees have gone on to build successful companies of their own. Watching them succeed gives me more satisfaction than any amount of money ever could. I'm 43 now. I look back at that graduation day 12 years ago and I see it differently. At the time, it felt like the worst day of my life. My father's words cut me so deeply that I thought I'd never recover. But in a strange way, that pain became my fuel. It drove me to work harder, to prove myself, to become someone I could be proud of regardless of anyone else's opinion. If my father had supported me that day, if he'd told me he was proud, would I have had the same fire? Would I have pushed myself so hard? I don't know. Maybe I would have settled for comfortable instead of reaching for exceptional. Cruelty, unintentional as it was, actually pushed me toward the success I eventually achieved. That doesn't make what he did right. It doesn't excuse the pain he caused. but it gives it context. It turns a story of simple hurt into something more complex. Something about how we transform pain into purpose. How we take the worst moments of our lives and use them as building blocks for something better. The house is still in my name. My parents still live there rent. I've never charged them a cent, never held it over their heads. The ownership isn't about control, it's about a quiet reminder for all of us of how far we've come. How I went from being called an embarrassment to being the one who saved them. How they went from dismissing their son to respecting him. How a family that was broken found a way, slowly and imperfectly, to heal. People ask me sometimes if I regret how I handled the situation. If I should have just paid off their debts without making a point, without that dramatic revelation, maybe. But I needed that moment. I needed them to understand, truly understand, what they dismissed. I needed to close that chapter of my life where their opinion mattered more than my own. And in doing so, I opened a new chapter where we could build something real. Last month, my father helped me with a project at my house. We were building a deck in the backyard, just the two of us, working with our hands. At one point, he stopped and looked at me. "You know what I think about sometimes?" he said. "That graduation, what I said to you. If I could go back and change one moment in my life, it would be that one." "I know, Dad," I said, "but you can't change the past. None of us can. We can only try to do better going forward." He nodded, hammering in another nail. "You're a better man than I ever was, John. Actually, I hope you know that. I'm just trying to be the best version of myself," I replied. "That's all any of us can do." We worked in companionable silence after that, father and son, building something together. It was a small thing, a deck, but it felt symbolic. We were building something new on top of an old foundation, taking what was broken and making it into something useful, something stronger. That's what this whole journey has been about, really. Taking the broken pieces of a relationship, of a family, of a self-image that was shattered on a graduation day 12 years ago and building something new, something better, something that can withstand the weight of the past without crumbling under it. I own my parents' house. I own the mortgage that would have destroyed them. But more importantly, I own my own story. I'm not the embarrassment my father called me. I never was. I'm the man who refused to let someone else's judgment define him. The man who took pain and turned it into purpose. The man who proved that success isn't about the name on your diploma or the approval of your parents. It's about the strength to keep going when everyone tells you you're not good enough. It's about proving yourself to yourself, not to anyone else. Don't forget to subscribe, hit that like button, and comment on this video. My name is John. I'm 43 years old, and this is the story of how the embarrassment became the hero. Cord. Not because I needed to be a hero, but because I needed to be free. Free from the weight of their judgment. Free from the need for their approval. Free to be exactly who I was meant to be, regardless of who they thought I should be. If you're out there and someone has made you feel like you're not enough, like you're an embarrassment, like you'll never amount to anything, I want you to hear this. They're wrong. They're projecting their own fears, their own limitations, their own insecurities onto you. You are not defined by their judgment. You are defined by your actions, by your character, by the strength you show when the world tells you to give up. Take that pain and use it, not as an excuse to be bitter, but as fuel to be better. Build something they never thought you could build. Become someone they never believed you could become. And then, when you've proven yourself, not to them, but to yourself, you'll find something interesting happens. The need for their validation disappears. You'll realize that you were never really doing it for them at all. You were doing it for you, to prove to yourself that you're capable of more than anyone ever gave you credit for. That's the real victory. Not the money in the bank account. Not the house with my name on the deed. Not even the apology from my father or the respect I finally earned from my family. The real victory is the man I became in the process. The man who refused to be broken by judgment. The man who turned humiliation into motivation. The man who proved that sometimes the biggest success story isn't about where you start, but about where you refuse to give up. I still have hard days. K's where that old hurt resurfaces, where I remember standing on that graduation stage, searching the crowd for my father's proud face and finding only indifference. Days where I wonder what my life would have been like if I'd had the support Marcus had, if I'd felt believed in and valued from the beginning. But those days are fewer now. They have less power over me, because I know the truth that took me 12 years to fully understand. I was never the embarrassment. I was always enough. I just needed to believe it myself before anyone else could. The house stands as a reminder of that truth. Every time my parents walk through that front door, they know who owns it. They know who saved them. They know that the son they dismissed became the son they needed. And every time I drive past it, I'm reminded of where I came from, what I overcame, and who I became in the process. This isn't a story about revenge, not really. It's a story about transformation, about taking the worst moments of your life and refusing to let them define you, about proving to yourself, and only yourself, that you're capable of extraordinary things, about building a life that makes you proud regardless of who else is watching or approving. My father called me an embarrassment at my graduation. 12 years later, I owned his house and his mortgage. But more than that, I owned my own life. I owned my own worth. I owned my own story. And that, more than any amount of money or property, is the real success. To anyone listening who's been dismissed, who's been called names, who's been told they'll never amount to anything, remember this. They're wrong, but you'll never prove them wrong by arguing with them. You'll prove them wrong by becoming so successful, so fulfilled, so genuinely happy with who you are that their opinion becomes irrelevant. That's the ultimate victory. That's how you win. My name is John. I'm 43 years old. I'm the man who turned embarrassment into empowerment, humiliation into motivation, pain into purpose. And if I can do it after everything I went through, then believe me when I say this, so can you. The journey isn't easy. There will be days when you want to give up, when the voices telling you you're not good enough feel too loud to ignore. There will be moments tenter novament tech continuer. You question whether it's worth the effort, whether proving yourself matters, whether you should just accept the role others have assigned to you. Don't. Keep going. Keep building. Keep believing in yourself even when no one else does. I think about the 21-year-old version of myself sometimes, standing in that rented graduation gown, hearing those words from my father. If I could go back and talk to him, I'd tell him that the pain he's feeling right now is temporary, but the strength he's about to develop is permanent. I'd tell him that every person who doubts him is giving him fuel for the fire that's going to forge him into someone extraordinary. I'd tell him that 12 years from now, he'll stand in that same house where he heard those words, and it will belong to him. Not just the physical structure, but the victory it represents. But I can't go back. None of us can. We can only move forward, carrying our scars but refusing to let them slow us down. We can only take each day as it comes, each challenge as an opportunity, each setback as a setup for a comeback. My relationship with my parents will never be perfect. There's too much history, too much hurt that can't be completely erased. But it's honest now. It's real. They see me for who I am, not who they wanted me to be. Committed. And I see them as flawed humans who made mistakes, not as the all-powerful judges I once thought they were. That's growth. That's healing. That's what happens when you stop waiting for an apology and start living a life that doesn't need one. Marcus and I talk every week now. He's building his own path, making his own mistakes, learning his own lessons. We support each other in ways we never could when we were younger, when we were trapped in the roles our parents assigned us. Cody, he's not the golden child anymore. I'm not the disappointment. We're just two brothers trying to figure out life, helping each other along the way. I've started dating again recently. For years, I was so focused on building my career, on proving myself, that I neglected my personal life. But now, with the business stable and my family relationships improved, I'm ready to build something else. Someone asked me on a date last week what my biggest achievement was, and I didn't mention the money or the business success or even buying my parents' house. I told her it was learning to value myself regardless of anyone else's opinion. She understood. We're going out again next weekend. Life has a way of coming full circle. The warehouse where I worked those night shifts to pay for college. I consulted for them last year, helping them develop their digital marketing strategy. Came at the marketing firm where I made barely above minimum wage. I've mentored 3 employees from there who went on to start their own companies. The state school I graduated from, I established a scholarship fund there for students from working-class backgrounds who were trying to make it without family support. I named it after my grandmother, the only person in my family who believed in me unconditionally before she passed away when I was 19. Every full-circle moment reminds me that success isn't linear. It's messy and complicated, and sometimes it takes you back to places you thought you'd left behind, but from a different perspective, from a position of strength instead of weakness, from a place of abundance instead of scarcity. Don't forget to subscribe, hit that like button, and comment on this video. People in my industry know me now. Spoken at conferences, been featured in business publications, advised companies with revenues in the hundreds of millions. But the moments that mean the most aren't the big stages or the impressive titles. They're the quiet moments. The young entrepreneur who emails me to say that my advice helped them secure funding. The college student who tells me that my story gave them hope when they were ready to give up. Person who says that hearing about my journey helped them set boundaries with a toxic family member. That's impact, that's legacy. That's what matters when the money is in the bank and the house is paid for and the revenge is complete. It's what you do with the platform your pain gave you. It's how you use your story to help others, write theirs. My father's business failure taught him humility, taught him that the markers of success he'd valued his entire life, the prestigious titles and the impressive companies, could disappear in an instant. What remains is character. What remains is the relationships you've built, the people who love you not for what you've accomplished, but for who you are. He's learning that lesson late in life, but better late than never. My mother volunteers now at a community center, helping low-income families navigate social services. Koshi, she says it gives her perspective, helps her understand how privileged she was to have the problems she had. Money problems, business problems, but never the kind of desperate poverty that so many families face. She's softer now, more empathetic, more human. We had Thanksgiving together last year, the whole family. It was the first holiday I'd attended in over a decade. We went around the table saying what we were grateful for, a tradition from when I was a kid that I'd forgotten about. When it was my father's turn, he looked at me and said, "I'm grateful for second chances. For sons who are better men than their fathers, for the opportunity to do better even when I don't deserve it." I didn't cry, but it was close. Some wounds heal slowly, layer by layer, moment by moment. That was one of those healing moments. Marcus said he was grateful for a brother who taught him that success isn't about impressing others, it's about impressing yourself. My mother said she was grateful that our family found its way back to each other, even though the journey was painful. When it was my turn, I said I was grateful for obstacles because they taught me strength, for judgment because it taught me self-belief, for pain because it taught me compassion. We ate dinner together, laughed together, told stories together. It wasn't perfect. There were still awkward moments, still topics we avoided, still wounds that weren't completely healed. But it was real. It was a family that had broken and found a way to piece itself back together, stronger in the broken places. I've learned that forgiveness isn't a single moment, it's a process. Some days I feel completely at peace with my past. Other days, something will trigger that old hurt and I'll remember what it felt like to be dismissed, to be called an embarrassment, to feel like I wasn't enough. But those days are becoming rarer. The scar tissue is tougher than the original wound. The house still stands as a symbol, but its meaning has evolved. It's not just a reminder of victory or vindication anymore. It's a reminder that everything changes, that power dynamics shift, that the person you are today isn't the person you'll be tomorrow if you keep growing, keep learning, keep pushing forward. It's a reminder that home isn't a building you own. It's a feeling of belonging you create. My parents will live in that house for as long as they want. When they're gone, I'll probably sell it. The financial value means nothing to me now. The symbolic value has served its purpose. What matters is that we found a way to be a family again, imperfect and scarred, but real. I mentor a young guy named David now. He's 23, graduated from a state school, working at a startup, getting dismissed by his family who wanted him to be a doctor. His story sounds familiar. I meet with him every month, share my experiences, help him navigate the challenges of building something while dealing with family pressure and self-doubt. Last week he told me, "You make me believe that it's possible, that I'm not crazy for wanting something different than what they want from me." "You're not crazy," I told him. "You're brave." And that's threatening to people who played it safe their whole lives. Don't let their fear become your limitation. He nodded, and I saw myself in his eyes. The same determination, the same pain, the same fire. He's going to make it. I know he is. Because people like us, people who've been dismissed and doubted, we have something that privileged people don't always have. Hunger. The kind of hunger that turns obstacles into opportunities, that turns judgment into jet fuel, that turns embarrassment into empowerment. I'm 43 years old now, but sometimes I feel ancient. Like I've lived 3 lifetimes in one. The lifetime before graduation, when I was naive enough to think my parents' approval mattered more than my own. The lifetime after graduation, when I was building myself from scratch, proving myself to ghosts and critics and the voice in my own head that sounded too much like my father's. And this lifetime, the one I'm living now, where I've learned that the only approval that matters is your own. This 3rd lifetime is the best one. It's quieter, more peaceful, less driven by anger or the need to prove something, more driven by purpose and the desire to help others avoid the pain I went through. Success, I've learned, isn't about accumulation. It's about contribution. It's about using what you've built, what you've learned, what you've overcome to make the path easier for those coming behind you. The business world is full of people who made it and then pulled the ladder up behind them. I want to be the opposite. I want to be the person who not only leaves the ladder down, but reinforces it, makes it stronger, holds it steady while others climb. Because I remember what it was like to climb alone, with people shaking the ladder, telling me to come back down, that I'd never make it to the top. I made it, and now I spend my time making sure others can too. Don't forget to subscribe, hit that like button, and comment on this video. Last month, I gave a talk at my old state college. They invited me as part of their Entrepreneur Speaker Series. I almost said no. The thought of going back there, to the place where it all started, where I walked across that stage to my father's indifference, it stirred up feelings I thought I'd buried. But I said yes. Because maybe there was a kid in that audience who needed to hear that it's possible, that state school isn't a limitation, that family doubt isn't destiny, that embarrassment can become empowerment. I stood on a stage in the same auditorium where my graduation ceremony had been held 12 years earlier. Different audience, different purpose, but the same space. I looked out at all those young faces, full of hope and fear and uncertainty, and I told them my story. Not the sanitized version, but the real one. The pain, the doubt, the humiliation, the long nights and the constant grinding, the moment my father called me an embarrassment, and the 12 years it took to prove him wrong. The room was silent. You could hear a pin drop. And when I finished, when I told them that success isn't about where you start, but about refusing to accept anyone else's limitations for your life, they stood up. All of them. A standing ovation that lasted so long I had to fight back tears. Afterward, dozens of students came up to talk to me, to thank me, to tell me their own stories of being doubted, dismissed, told they weren't good enough. I stayed for hours, talking to each one, giving advice, offering encouragement, sharing contact information. If even one of them goes on to achieve something extraordinary because I made them believe it was possible, then that talk was worth it. Then my pain had purpose beyond just my own healing. That's what I've learned in these 43 years. Pain without purpose is just suffering, but pain with purpose becomes your superpower. It becomes the thing that makes you unstoppable because you've already survived the worst thing you thought could happen. You've already been called an embarrassment by the people who were supposed to believe in you most. What could the world possibly throw at you that's worse than that? Nothing. Absolutely nothing. And that realization is liberating. It means you're free to take risks, to chase dreams, to build impossible things. Because failure can't hurt you the way judgment already has. Combined, you're immunized against the opinions of others because you survived the worst opinion possible and came out stronger. I look at where I am now, at everything I've built, at the relationships I've repaired, at the life I've created, and I feel something I never thought I'd feel about that graduation day. Gratitude, not for the pain itself, but for what it taught me, for the strength it forced me to develop, for the person it pushed me to become. If my father had been proud of me that day, if he'd celebrated my achievement and supported my dreams, would I have pushed as hard? Would I have achieved as much? Would I be who I am today? I honestly don't know. Maybe I needed that pain. Maybe it was the catalyst that turned potential into reality, that transformed a regular kid with a state school degree into someone who could achieve extraordinary things. That doesn't make what he did right, but it makes it useful. And sometimes that's the best we can do with our pain. Make it useful, make it mean something, make it the foundation for something better. My father and I were working on his car a few weeks ago. It's an old sedan, nothing fancy, but he loves that car. We were changing the oil together, our hands dirty with grease, working side by side like we did when I was a teenager. He stopped at one point, wiped his hands on a rag, and looked at me. "You know what kills me?" he said. "It's not that I was wrong about you. It's that I was so sure I was right. I looked at you, and I saw failure, and I was so convinced of my own judgment that I couldn't see what was actually there. A kid with more drive and determination than I ever had. A kid who was going to prove everyone wrong, including me. Especially me. You were scared," I said. "I get that now. You were scared because I was doing something you never had the courage to do. Taking risks, building something from nothing. It reminded you of your own limitations, so you tried to limit me too." He nodded slowly. Yeah, that's exactly it. You figured that out a lot faster than I did." "I had a lot of time to think about it," I said, not unkindly. "A lot of angry nights, wondering why you couldn't just be proud of me. Eventually, I realized it wasn't about me at all. It was about you. And you still saved us," he said quietly. "Even after everything, you saved us. Why?